now, most of the devices that we procure, on which we develop applications and which we install, were not basically made totally with a security perspective. They were made for functionality perspective, so they have lots of functionality, and those functionalities are used based on individual requirements. So whenever we are trying to develop a software, we take user requirements. Based on the user requirements, we also take some kind of an environment on which the application should run. So on that application, we will be trying to uh, develop and install a system that is optimized for that environment. Okay. But in cyber resilient systems, we are trying to develop a system which is inherently competent to take care of cyber threats.
Okay.
In normal,
now, sir, sorry to interrupt you. So, what is, I mean, do you think a programmer should be, what is the importance of a programmer to have an awareness on cyber resilient applications? So, does every programmer needs this kind of awareness?
Yes. So when we are developing a software, let's say I'm a developer, so I am trying to develop a software. So I'm writing some code. I'm given a piece of functionality, and I'm required to write a small snippet or write the whole program or a whole application, depending upon the nature of it. So when I'm developing it, I'm developing a software and putting it on a server. Mostly, if you are developing a web server, that is always exposed to internet. So therein, the problem is that your code, whatever you have written, is now exposed to any threat that comes from outside. So as a developer, whether it's a small piece that you have written in the whole application or the whole application you have written, you should be aware of the consequences of using different kinds of design elements in it. Usually what happens, there is, you may have architect and a designer. Maybe you may be, some of you in a larger organizations may have very detailed specs given with a lot of standards in implementation and development. So you will be adhering to the coding as per the standards of your organization. But several of them may not really have that vigor of standards from security perspective.
So, typically in the industry, this is what happens. So generally, a team or a developer will get a requirement, agree for a particular functionality.
Correct.
So developer will write his lines of code. Okay, he develop it, and then goes to the QA team. Isn't it? They will test. And a developer does not much worry about this cyber resilient or not,
or any security.
Yeah, he's generally a layman programmer I'm talking about.
Correct.
So he just makes sure that the functionality is working or not. And testing team, they check all the possible scripts, all the possible inputs and outputs. And that's it. I think we release it to production. Typically, this is what happens. Am I right?
Yeah. So in that, what is happening is, see, most of it, as we are looking at most of the cases that you get in a smaller organizations, is that the customer does not really know the impact or importance of security as well. So when you have requirements, usually you'll have the functional requirements and non-functional requirements should be there, which are called technical requirements or your quality requirements, wherein normally this security aspects will come into it, apart from the performance related issues, availability issues and other things will come under technical component of the requirements. As we see, most of the customers are not so well versed in asking for those technical specifications, but they come up when you go back and try to install. When you're after installation, when you have done your UATs and you're trying to hand over, it is generally at that point in time a customer comes back to you and says, sir, it doesn't meet my requirement, or it doesn't, it's not secure, it is not functioning as I expected, things like that. But if we are aware that these are becoming mandatory or requirements, we will be looking for those specifications well ahead of our development and design phase, so that during the total SDLC phases, all the phases, starting from inception, concept level to the delivery, maintenance, and retirement, we will be thinking about the security components, incorporating them so that the customer also will be always happy with it.
Okay, so you mean to say a developer or the team should be aware before starting the development that that application should
Yeah.
be cyber resilient.
Yes.
So, sir, in this CMM level 5, do you think all these level 5 companies follows these standards?
If you
What
see
is your
CMM
experience?
level 5, it's
Mhm.
about maturity of development, software development, right?
Mhm.
It
Yes.
only speaks about there is a structured approach to software development. And most of the developments that we do or anybody does it, this is again driven by the customer's requirements. So usually what happens is when the customer is asking for certain requirements,
Let's
the
say customer is
developers
looking
will
for a let's say customer is looking for this kind of a social networking site like Facebook, assuming that.
if he asks for security, because security is such a vast subject and it is always driven by the end user's requirements. So there is no one set of rules for security, just like you don't have one approach to architecture of a software. So
Okay.
the security we will be, I'll just briefly touch upon those aspects as we go. Here now, I'll just, what is the relevance? Why are we so concerned about cyber security and all of these days? So what we have seen is there's a lot of cyber attacks. India has been one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and it attracts a lot of eyesore from a lot of other countries. We also have some countries which are our enemy countries, which they want to pull us down and slow the development of the country. And the country, in fact, we are trying to reach out to the rural and the remotest parts through the IT channels. So IT channel is one of the important elements for our own country's development. If a cyber attack happens and the confidence of the people goes away on some of the IT systems, then there will be a lag or a slowing down of the economy or that part of functions, and that part of those sectors also will be impacted. So cyber security is very important from the economic point of view, people's welfare point of view, and our own standards of development. So if you see last year, there were about 12 crore attacks on Indian organizations. Nearly 14 lakh went into breaches. That is, they went beyond the initial breakage. They went into and accessed some data or did some mischief for the company to be bothering about. This year, there is an enhanced, there's 51% increase in one particular type of attack, that is ransomware attack.
This is becoming very popular.
This is becoming, because I'll just share some details about it, why it is becoming so popular or why it is growing at that rate. So ransomware, if most of you would have heard about it, fine. If not, I'll just introduce you to that in my next few slides. So cyber attacks against India have been growing over the last 2 years, if we have seen, because during the COVID, we were one of those few countries which had utilized IT and networking available within the country to the maximum extent possible. If you've heard of some of those things, like when we had a COVID certificate, we had a digital certificate, while in US it was a physical certificate.
Okay.
So you should be aware of the kind of progress we have made in various things, how quickly we could launch on a national scale and reach so many users. See, you all know from a computer background that for a computer, a transaction, the number of transactions are important. It is not the value in the transactions. It doesn't matter, because for the processor, how many concurrent hits happen, how much it can handle. So the scale at which it happens in India is far greater than it happens anywhere in the world, because
Especially because of its population.
population, we have so many hits, so many numbers, huge numbers, the frequency and all is very high. So that's where the Indian systems should be robust enough to withstand these things. There are some newspaper reports you would have come across. The 14 lakh security incidents were reported by CERTIN. You might have heard about CERTIN. That's the Indian Computer Emergency Response Team under the Ministry of Information, IT, Electronics and Information Technology Department. And they have submitted 14 lakh security incidents to the Parliament. So that's an official figure. There is a 13% rise in ransomware attacks last year, and this year it is 51%. So the companies can expect more attacks because there's no way you can stop these cyber criminals, and there's no way that things are improving in the software side or on the IT side that suddenly these attacks can come down. So we are expecting more and more attacks to happen as we go. So India was number 3 among Asian countries, and ransomware was one of the dominant type of attacks in organizations in India. This is an IBM report. We have a National Security Council where they are trying to integrate physical, electronic, and information technology, all types of defense, whether it is somebody walking across the border, somebody sending a ransomware or some kind of a threat across the border digitally, somebody trying to attack with different modes. So these people, National Security Council is trying to now, because cyber warfare has become one of the warfares, one of the types of
medium of war.
for war, and that's becoming one of the attacking modes where they can usually in a war under the current international guidelines, you cannot attack civilians, okay? But if you cripple the IT systems and networks, you can even reach all the civilians and all the critical sectors. If you have heard about it, we have seen a lot of attacks on electricity on Ladakh area. Okay, they attacked 11 transmissions places where they could not have. They could have totally brought down the electricity, their supply there, but our people immediately figured out and responded to it. There were attacks even in Mumbai. So there are a lot of such attacks happening in the country. You would be seeing them in the newspapers most of the time. The small sector, if you take small, large organizations lose in multiple crores of rupees. Even smaller organization in India, when they have surveyed people who have been hit by these kinds of cyber attacks, they lost between 3.5 to 7 crores for each company. So that is the kind of threat that these things pose. If you say ransomware, why ransomware is so feared these days is because they are doing triple extortion. Triple extortion is, tell you just how they extract money. What the criminal does is that he will first try to attack our information system. Once he sits in the system, what he does is he takes your data.
Okay.
So he steals your data. Once he steals your data, he encrypts it. Now, without his key, you cannot decrypt or do anything on your data. Not just one system, the whole organizations, any number of systems. This entire activity of figuring out where all you stored your data happens for a couple of months. They will not reveal their presence for 1 or 2 months. They are there within your own network. They are trying to figure out where all your data is there. One day they encrypt it after having stolen that data. Then they will say, if you want it, you pay me ransom, I will give you access to I'll give you a key which will decrypt it. Second thing they threaten is, they'll say, I'll put all your customers' data and other data on dark web where they sell it, and it can be used by other criminals for attacking these customers. So they'll say all the data about yourself and other customers, I'm going to put on that. So you pay me additional ransom. Okay. So then the victim has to pay one for getting the information and the other one for stopping him from putting it in the dark web. Then what they're doing further is they're going to the customers whose data they have procured. There they're threatening them, saying that I will put your data on the sale if you don't pay me money. So they're extracting the money in 3 different modes.
Okay.
And
So they
sometimes
target organizations as well as individual customers
individuals
as well.
also, whatever data they have, they go and they try to threaten them. So that's why it has become very important thing to be guarding an organization. So the impact of any breaches, you lose customers, you'll have a lot of litigation because you have to go to the court of law and try to prove it. It's very difficult to prove. You need a lot of evidence. So that's where we come in. We have to create logs. If most of the time when we are developing, developers will not be creating any logs of events, any logs of application, assuming that it is going to occupy a lot of disk space. They generally neglect generating, storing logs or securing logs.
Even the
When
clients are also unaware of this importance of
they are
logs.
not aware of it. So
Yeah.
as
So
a
they don't
developer,
focus on it.
yeah, as a developer, say for example, something happens, somebody comes, invades us, steals the money. If you do not have logs, if you do not have proper record of it, how are you going to prove in a court of law? So for litigations, what happens is we have to spend money because it has come out. The customers are complaining against us. There are public money is lost. So the criminal investigations and all will go on, but we will have to defend ourselves in the court of law. So that's where the companies will be bothered. They'll have regulatory fines for not taking proper care of customer data. There'll be competitive setbacks. Once the name comes, the reputation is lost, the
Yes.
competition is lost. Then so all this, there are so much of laws beyond what is given to the criminal. Okay, so the entire cost of this kind of negligence on security is something worthwhile to incorporate in the design and development. So much of see, we all know that as we start in the initial phases of any development, the cost of any change is very low. As we go, we develop, then we put it into maintenance. At the maintenance, if I want major changes, it is so huge cost wise. So it's always better that we incorporate these aspects into our design from the very beginning, because later on the damage is quite huge. So we can actually stop any cyber threat in about 3 or 4, because cyber threats attacks happen in a phases. First, there is a survey phase where they'll figure out what are the technical procedural weaknesses that we have. So when the code is weak, or we have installed in a kind of a web server where the basic server is not properly configured, there are issues with it.
So you mean to say hacker do some basic
First, he will do the survey. He will study your, because there is, when there is a traffic that is coming from the web, from outside the internet. So there is always a possibility for him to collect whatever is available on the system. Let us say suddenly my there's an error. Okay, when I'm looking into a web page, something is not found. You generally show a 404 web error normally. When you're showing 404, there's a trace also shown below that, where you will know exactly the path to that particular location where it is searched and failed. Okay, so there is so much of information that structure is always now made available to the attacker. He knows, okay, this structure is like this. So he can, if he gets, let's say some of your error will suddenly fail into a prompt. If the prompt is exposed when some, because of some failure in a page or some function or something, the prompt, then he can go and do whatever he wants, and the entire
can penetrate into the
penetrate easily. So there are so many ways in which they see how they can be hacked. Usually what happens when we are using a particular application background systems, like you have Windows system, Linux system, or on which you have put web server, a particular web server. So they know the hidden vulnerabilities or weaknesses of that and how to exploit it. So they do the survey. Then they do the network scanning. When they do the network scanning, they'll know which ports are open on your system servers, which are responding to them, which they can utilize to further get. See, what happens is, for example, if I am a public user, I come and try to connect to a system. I will be like a guest or an unauthorized individual.
Yes.
When I have a login credentials, I will be a user. Now, generally, a public guest will not have so much powers or permissions. A logged in user will have a less reduced permissions. But if I get to a prompt, if I get to a kind of an access to the system's functions, then I'll have a much bigger, like admin access powers rights to that system. So the people they'll be looking at, they'll do the scans and surveys. Okay. So the first thing is that when we configure our systems, when we configure our own applications, when we program it, when we try to put it, if we are putting those security components into it, the kind of the information that can leak out from this will be very reduced, so that he will not have enough interest. See what happens when the thieves come, or even in your normal thing, if you have a very strong lock,
Yes.
they will take, if there is a weaker lock next door, they will go into the next door. They will not try to spend
Avoid the
time on
stronger
you
lock.
because they will be got caught, or a lot of effort is has to be put and all. So usually if you put a stronger set of configurations and other things, it is better, it's greater chance that you will not be hacked so easily. So there is a delivery part when they deploy a malware into that, which malware will start connecting to the attacker. So based on that's called a command center. So he will be dictating different activities for that malware which is come onto your system, which is sitting on your system, and he can get things done. So there, the delivery path, they'll see how to come into that. Phishing is one of those things. So through that, they come and phishing is something, if you know, it's like a mail that comes. Mail comes with an attachment. Generally, you think it is from a known person, a known useful attachment, or something you are curious about. You open the attachment, the malware is transferred onto your system. From there, this malware starts connecting to the
Network also.
internet to the attacker, and from there the other things that are required for further hacking your systems will be gradually sent by the hacker to the device, and then that device will start attacking rest of the organization. Then there's a breach. Breach is when exactly you will know that data has been accessed, or some server has been accessed. Then comes your final stage where he will do the damage that is required to be done. At each of these stages, at the survey stage, if I'm not leaking out the information, keeping it confidential through proper programming, proper configuration of the servers, using the right applications, using the most secure way of doing it, then updating the patches and other things, the survey part, he will not have much information about us. If you are also blocking a lot of unwanted ports and
Using
services
firewalls.
and other things, yeah. So that survey part, we can try to reduce the possibility of him getting to know a lot about us.
Yes.
Then delivery part is once most of the delivery happens through some involvement of a human being. Why human being? Either you are a programmer who has developed it, so there's a human vulnerability or a fault that can be traced to a human being, or you would have configured as an admin. So again, a human being is doing that configuration. He might not have done it properly, so he is leaving some windows open for the delivery to happen. Or as when it comes as a phishing or some modes, I as a user, again a human being, I'm downloading it into my system. So for all these things, most of the time, it requires certain amount of awareness and training among people to reduce the chances of delivery happening. Okay. So if the delivery happens or something comes in, some antivirus or some other thing comes in, if the user is aware that this is some malware I need to report, he can report it to the right people within the organization, and it can be blocked to go to the breach level. Because from your device, he has to start tracing a way to the where the data is there. So we can stop it there. Once the breach happens, usually very little we can do because the data has already gone to him. The only way that we can reduce the dependence for ransomware and all is to take a good backup of the data on an external device. If it is there any number of places on the network, the attacker will have an access to it. They will encrypt all the copies of the data that is there on the network. But if you are taking it in an external device and keeping it aside, there's a possibility that it is safe for you. But the frequency at which you take the backups is important. If I have taken it yesterday, 24 hours of transactions or whatever changes would have gone for me, I'll have to rebuild. If it is last month's data backup, I have an external device, I have to rebuild 1 month. So
Yes.
that's how the defenses will have to go. So the attacker normally is using the remote desktop protocol. If you are a developer and have kept that remote desktop protocol open, that is, you are able to allow someone, or you are yourself using a piece of software to connect to someone remotely on a desktop and have an access to that desktop or take a control over the desktop. That is a major weakness in our organizations. If you are a developer and if you have a remote desktop protocol running on your system, you have a very good chance
There's a
of
possibility.
opening up channels for the
Okay.
actors. So what they do, they'll send you an email where the phishing comes. Sometimes they'll say, okay, on the email, they'll say, I'm your administrator. I want to reset your password or something. Kindly log in and then reset your password. He's actually taking you to a fake website through a link. So there, what is happening is you are giving out username and password to your cyber attack.
So it's our
Sometimes-
responsibility to make sure whether
Yes,
the website
yes.
URL is right or not.
Yeah, we have to look for it, and then only be careful about the emails that come onto the developers system. Usually what most organizations do is they do not give emails this thing to everyone sometimes. Okay, now then what happens, there could be some website you may be usually all developers, let us say all people developers will visit certain sites for information. What the attacker does is he plants some malware on that. So when you go and you download something from that website or visit this website, there's a possibility that you will get that infected with that. Sometimes what happens is you may be getting it from others, outside people also. Okay. So there are different ways in which we have to be careful about. Do not have a RDP running on your devices all the time. You do not be careful about your email systems, and also be careful about the websites. I've seen some developers running videos, looking other things, YouTube and all on their devices on which they are coding. Better not do it, because there's a possibility of a malware coming through that source also. Okay, so we have to be a little careful about those kinds of things. So sometimes it comes from partners also. You may be having your service provider somewhere who can also be from him, through him also you may be getting some malware. Okay, all these will only enhance the possibilities of cyber threats. Okay, sometimes USBs you are going to put, you will take it to somebody has brought in a USB and you put it. That USB is also will carry some virus which can get into your system. So the bad actors are using so many different methods to get to you. If you have heard about recent threats, there were a lot of attacks on software companies in Bangalore. They have snatched or stolen their code. Why? Each company would have given that software to several of their customers. From the code, they will figure out what the vulnerabilities are, how they can hack those systems, so that now they can attack the customers of that software company. And another case, what happened when Microsoft itself received in one case a driver which was infected with a virus. So that drivers officially were distributed by Microsoft. The customers who have downloaded that were impacted. So there are multiple ways in which these bad actors are trying to invade our systems and snatch the information. Water holing is one method that they do. Water holing is all the animals come to the water to drink the water, and the predators, they are waiting there. So they know these people will come here. That's how when I said about a websites where they can put in the malware, which we all visit often. From there, they attack us.
It could be e-commerce websites or something.
E-commerce. No, not only that, say for example, you are interested in Java, you go to a site where there's something on Java, or you go to Python, you wanted to go and look at some site where there's a lot of information on Python. So anywhere, whichever the outside, if it is having a weaker system, I can plant something there. You visit it. It's a guarantee that it will go to about several thousands of people. So that's it. So in an organization, it can come through many sources. So we are worried about how it actually transports within the organization. It moves from one system to another. It is not that all systems should be exposed to internet. So once it starts moving from one to one. After it has come to all the devices, then they trigger and data is compromised. They can encrypt and ransom. They can destroy it. They can take a copy of it. They can corrupt it. So they can do whatever they want. So they have a total control of it. So there are layers of things. So most of the implementations of web servers will be better to have it a 3-tier structure, so that the components can be now here. I can break it into a web server, application server, and a database server, and protect each of them on a different devices.
Yes.
So that the control is more. The possibility if he encrypts or he reaches the web server, I know something is not okay. I can block them here so that they'll not come to the application. So
At
that's
least
how
the database layer is safe.
Yeah. So like that, you have to structure I have seen applications which are all combined and put as one piece, which is not safe.
Application and database together in one layer.
If you see most of the attack methods, system intrusion is the most that's picking up. Systems intrusion is that I find a weakness in an application or a server's OS or the web application server and directly go and attack it. So the basic web application attacks are rudimentary attacks. These are happening. These are also on a very high level. So since we are looking at around the software development side, these are the things that are important. The system intrusion and basic web application. Others are there like miscellaneous errors. Social engineering is a way through the phishing and all that gets into our systems. Privilege misuses, when I have given you an example earlier that you are an user, so you don't have a lot of privileges. But if I get an access to the prompt, I will get systems privileges. So how I can escalate it? That's how. Sometimes what happens, the privilege misuse, a person has all the admin rights with him, although they do not need it. And there's a possibility that they do some errors, which will cause the system to crash or some kind of a malware to come in. So in the ransomware, they have now it's come out like a service. So people subscribe. There are people who are taking whenever you are listening or looking at large databases being hacked, the user profiles, user credentials being taken. There are some people who are doing that. There is somebody who is doing how to hack. So they are building all the material required, all the code that is required or tools that are required for doing the attacks. And there is third person who is actually hiring both of these people and taking the inputs from both of them and actually committing the attack. So now it has become so a person who is doing this person, the RAS affiliate, does not have to be very computer savvy or technical savvy, nothing. He draws from both these people and he does an attack. All he needs to know is pick the target. That's where the numbers have gone. So these are some of those major types of attacks that are happening. The complex attacks uses social engineering, malware, lateral movement that we have just spoken about, all of them to get to the data and fix it. So the web-based is to get in and get out. They take the data and go out. They are not doing beyond that. They are only interested on the website. So they take the credentials. Those credentials are used elsewhere for further attacks. So denial of service attacks are where a lot of network traffic is bombarded against one router or organization. So no one else will get any access to those things. The social engineering is where people's psychology is utilized for they are targeted through that, their behavior. Suddenly I am curious of something, I open. The moment I open up, it could be a picture, it could be a file, it could be a compressed file, whatever it is. When I open, the moment the malware comes, because they're creating a curiosity in the user to open it. So that's how the social engineering works. Sometimes they'll say, okay, you might be getting some calls saying that your ATM, somebody has withdrawn some money, you just call this number and we will fix it. When you call that number, he will be asking about your card number, your account number, your PIN number, so on, so other details. So that they grab all that and they dupe you with that. So social engineering techniques are like that, which are trying to fool people and trying to dupe them. Miscellaneous errors are unintentional actions. They happen because a lot of things. Most of these actions happen when the interface, user interface is not clear to the user. So from application development point of view, the user interface should be clear. We see sometimes the user manuals are all not fully developed. Yeah, they'll say, okay, name, the prompt will be enter the name. Address, enter the address. What do you mean by address, or enter the what address or what name is supposed to be there is not clear to the user. So the user manuals, the kind of interfaces should be user friendly, ensuring that users will not commit unnecessary mistakes. So these are all the things that are used for privilege misuse. I have already told you. Lost and stolen assets. If you have a laptop, if it's stolen, that's another way they are taking the code. Your code will be available, and then a lot of information is available. So the threat actors that are there, they are using what is already available on the environment. Now these days they are using what is there on your Windows systems or on your whatever CMD they use, PowerShell they use, task schedulers they are using, WinRM. Likewise, what is happening? Run DLL is very essential for running anything on a Windows system. So they are using these things to support their own attacks. So what happens? You cannot disable these, you cannot remove them, you cannot stop them. And it's very difficult for you to figure out what exactly is happening as well. So now they have come to a stage where your antivirus will not be supporting you or helping you, because if these are there, these will not be stopped. PowerShell will not be stopped by an antivirus, and DLL cannot be stopped by an antivirus. So they are using these methods to attack. So we have to be careful about our development as well. So they are trying to look for unauthorized access, modification, use. Disclosure is putting it into the public, where you take a copy of it and put it over. Disruption is to stop your operations. Incapacitation is to bring down, like your DOS attack, DDoS attacks, where suddenly there's a huge network and your system will not be able to respond to anything. So destruction is where the data is destroyed. So there are different levels of risks that the organizations look see from different types of threats, and they will ask you to give you requirements based on that. How much of a security? Let us say I have an application like a bank's application, where the data is about all the financial information is there, your account data is there, your transactions are there. That is very important for the bank. So they will want a lot of security for that. But if it's a small thing which is only having some, let's say, something that is sending greetings or something, sending some other a smaller application that is running on one of the systems, which is not so very important for them, that will not have so much requirement. So as a developer, we have to see that these are the things that can happen with a wrong code, or a faulty code, or a weak code, or a vulnerable code, whatever you need to name it as. And we have to be careful about developing it and incorporating those features, security features, into our code, and how we deploy, how we architect, how we ensure let's say you have different roles like admin, user. In users, there are different roles. What I have normally seen is that these applications, when they develop, they think that they can control it through menu. But if I go and give a path to another file which I'm not supposed to access, it will be available because there was no clear restrictions on my access to those things on the system. So there are those weaknesses. Audit logs have to be generated. If you do not have audit logs, you will yourself not be able to figure out what has gone wrong, where things have gone wrong, how the somebody has made a misuse of your system or your code, where the logic failed. For all that, you need a log.
Log is very critical.
Very critical. So when the data is there, your services are acting with data, events are acting with data, apps are acting with data. Each of these are generating some kind of status change or some event is happening. All this will have to go into the log.
Yes.
So based on the events, now you can reconstruct what has exactly gone wrong, whether it's the data was the problem, whether service was the problem, anything else was.
So when we have an audit log, we can prove to the court of law.
And not only even for your own investigation or your own diagnostics, figuring it out, you have to look at what the problem is. So logs, I have seen that most of the people, they develop and they do not focus much on the logs.
Yes.
So the application logs are important.
Very important.
For later on, when the customer calls and says, no, your logic is wrong or something has happened, I have not, did not expect this to happen. You will not know, there is no way you can capture what that user has entered. What is this environment that in which it failed? You have no clue about it. You have to only figure out, you'll say, okay, how can I recreate it? You will ask for an example. You'll say, okay, I want to recreate to figure out what it is. The customer will not remember anything what he has done. You'll say, I have not done anything.
Yes.
But he has done something which had failed it. That is not captured. So once we capture those events, it will be possible for us to diagnose it, to fix the problem and to tell the customer exactly this is what you have done. This is because of that it failed, or this is why it has happened, so and so. So those things are very important from logs. Audit logs are essential. If you look at vulnerabilities or flaws that are exploited, there are different nomenclatures used. Flaws are unintended functionality. Suddenly I have not disabled. Let us say there is a case, if it is X, it will do this, it's Y, it will do this, nothing. There is no code written for what happens if it is not X or Y. So if I'm putting a new value which is not X or Y, it will end up in an error. It can come to a prompt and something else can happen. So flaws are unintended functionalities which are not being removed. Okay, because you are logically there is something that you have missed out. Let us say I've seen the dates. Some dates can be, what do you do with a blank date? Some validations are not there for a blank date. They expect the date should be filled because at the entry, when the date is filled, it will ensure that date, month and year is taken. But what if a blank date comes to you? So likewise, flaws could be there. Those flaws are also extra. Features intended is an intended functionality which is misused by an attacker because you do not have proper validation. Let us say I give you a feature says, okay, 1 or 2. So what if I give 3? So will it treat as 1, 2 or something, or it exposes me the whole thing. So when the feature is there, then it can be misused by an attacker because there's no proper validation. Sometimes what they'll do, for example, in your name, instead of name of 20 characters, 40 characters you're expecting, I paste a huge text file in that. What happens? Will it crash? It could crash. If it crashes, will it give me a prompt? It could give me a prompt. So I'm using a feature which is there with you, which is not properly protected. I can misuse it. Administrator errors. So it is not properly. See, there are 2 legs. One is your design, develop, then is the implementation stage and maintenance stage. Sometimes what happens, if your So when you are taking a code from UAT stage, sign off, and then you are deploying. But during the deployment, you have not written any deployment note, or release note is not there. So the other person may not know exactly what changes would have happened. You may have a old user manual or a system manual, after which there was multiple releases and nothing update has happened. Now somebody comes in, okay, I know daily I'm doing it. I know, okay, last year this happened, and last month this happened. But a new guy comes and sits here. He does not know. So if he is using the old document that is existing with him for any of the configurations or other issues, there will be a lot of problems, because whatever the new learnings were there, they're all lost. So the documentation and proper training or proper orientation, we talk about KT, knowledge transfer, all the time, but KT does not happen properly. The person who is leaving knows a lot more than what the person coming next has.
Yes.
So the user errors, if the users are not properly prompted, users are not given proper training, or
Training.
a lot of things are left to the users, errors could happen. So after the attack, life gets very complicated. There are financial losses, loss of productivity, reputation, legal, and business continuity website. So when it comes to the configurations of Cyber Reliance, what they do is, first you do a risk management. That is, you see exactly what the organization users want. From there, you have to create a very clear capabilities into your system. So for creating, they expect that your system or your architecture, your solution or the product you're giving should be able to withstand a lot of cyber threats. It should be able to recover. And then when it translates into the next step of objectives, we are trying to prevent something happening. We are trying to, in the prepare part, what it is that, see here in objectives, first is to understand. You have to clearly understand what your system is, what your configurations are, what your application is, what your components are. Let's say I take a freeware or a open source ware and incorporate it into my web development. Now, do I have any understanding about the vulnerabilities that are there in the open source? I do not have.
Yes.
I'm just taking it out of trust because everybody is doing it. I'm taking it and using it. Was it developed for such a very secure environment? It might not have been. Most of the these open source are developed in-house by their own people.
Especially
And
APIs nowadays, all the APIs, integrations, third-party tools.
So even if you look at your own, let's say, tools that are there, that are add-ons that come, that are actually released by what somebody has tried in-house. Your APIs also are another area where you do not know what is happening behind API. Yes. What happens if a particular parameter is wrongly defined, or if you are not sending some information, how the API responds to you, you do not really understand. Documentation is also not there. When you are writing an API, you should be very clear that the person who is accessing and using the API, even if it does a blunder, it should not upset your own system. Okay, it should not upset. It should send it. It should be able to handle it. So when you are writing an API, usually what happens in API is, one problem is that there are multiple functions an API can do. So they will branch out all the functionality within that API. Sometimes you miss out some of the logic, and when the malformed input comes, your API will not be able to decipher what to do. It can do lots of mischief can happen there. So when you're writing APIs also, it's better to keep each functionality separate. Maintenance wise, it is easy. Logic wise, it is easy. And handling also, it will be more secure if you have APIs in a different way. So that's just that you mentioned about API, I was talking about it. Then prevent and avoid. You have to avoid mistakes from happening. You have to avoid somebody from attacking, ability to attack you. So you reduce your exposures to that. Prepare is there. Prepare is where You have to prepare the users, you have to prepare yourself, you have to prepare your own people. Let's say some attack happens. If the customer calls you and says, sir, there's an attack, what do I do? You should have enough understanding about your system to say, do this, do that, whatever the guidance you need to give. The preparation is both for him and both for you. So it should be, you should be aware of if such and such a thing happens, how do I handle it? If the data is hacked, what do I do? How do I take, where from I restore shall I restore my system? Is my application latest version of my application backup ready? Is it secure? Or I have lost my this thing, I don't have a backup of my application. Then data I have, but not the application. Then it misbehaves. So likewise, the preparation requires you to look at scenarios and being ready with different options for handling different scenarios. Continue is how do I keep continuing? Because let's say my website is down. Should the organization shut down or should they have some alternate ways of continuing it? So they may be able to do it manually. Do I have an interface for manually done things to be fed back into my data properly and updated, or I cannot do that? Then there's a problem. So this continuity part also should be incorporated into our design. Constraints will be there. Suddenly I have a huge server with a huge network supporting me today. Suddenly there was an attack and they moved on to a smaller system which was readily available. Or let us say there is a Windows system which was hacked. Now, if I again restore on the same Windows system, the hacker will again hack within a few minutes because he knows exactly how to hack. But I may be changing it over to, let's say now Linux system. So suddenly if I have to change the Linux system, will all my operations, all my application, will it work on Unix system on the same way? Are there any dependencies? So reconstitute. In reconstitute, sometimes what happens is you may have to redesign, replay, put them at different places. When you're transforming it, is suddenly you may have to change the way it acts, behaves. You may have to change some logics internally. You may have to change the way the system behaves. So all that we should have some pre-planned approaches to it. Re-architect. The whole thing may have to be redesigned. We may have to transfer it into a totally a different architecture. So all these are a part of the engineering. So it is not just the developer who is what we are talking when we are talking about resilience. It's a whole team of people. It's the architect
is involved, the developer is involved,
the maintenance people are involved, the client will be involved, and the person who is giving you the environment is involved. So many people are involved. So it's a kind of a integrated approach to it. So there are different techniques for achieving these objectives. So these techniques, if you have time, I think we have run out of time, 5:01.
Yes.
If the users are ready to, the audience is ready to spend some more time, I'm available.
How much time it will take approximately?
We'll take another 15 minutes. We'll try to, I'll run through the techniques part because that could be something of interest. So I'll quickly run through those techniques.
On a high level.
On a high. So these are the techniques. So in the techniques, what happens? These are again not something that at a code level, it's at the architecture level, at the approach level, or the approach you take to developing your software. So adaptive response, I'll just take you just here. Adaptive response, dynamic reconfiguration. These are all possible to some extent in a cloud environment. Suddenly one server is down, you can quickly switch over to another server.
Yes.
You can reconfigure it. You can immediately move from a Windows. Suddenly you can take Unix system on the same this thing. You can move it. All that are possible.
Cloud helps us to do.
Cloud helps to some extent to adaptive response. Some people say in cloud also, in large organizations like financial sector and all, they will not want to have a public cloud. They may be having their own clouds.
Private clouds.
Private clouds. So the analytic monitoring, this is monitoring the damage assessment. See, from the logs, if you are having proper logs, logs can be analyzed and figured out where all things have gone wrong, so that you will be able to respond. You'll know what has to be replaced, which is working, which is reliable, which is not reliable. Because the moment it has been attacked, your trust on that device will go.
Yes.
So the moment I see, should I trust all? Let's say I have about 1,000 servers, 100 servers. So do I have to lose trust on all the 100 servers? No, maybe one or two servers were attacked. I realized at that point in time, he has not yet reached the other servers. I will know from these logs and analytics, behavior, the network traffic, where from it is coming, which IPs are exchanging this traffic. So all that is possible by proper logging and maintaining those logs and analysis of those logs. Then coordinated protection. So it has, what happens is in a defense in depth, as I told you earlier, there are 4 stages, for example, of an attack. So we are using different types of controls, devices, and methods or strategies to stop them at different levels. So you could have a kind of a way where let's say in a large organization, there are so many people taking care of, somebody taking care of network, another
Yes.
company is taking care of database servers, somebody is taking care of systems administration, somebody is developing
Middleware
the
team.
software. So many different teams are there,
They're
but
specialized in each.
specialized in each one. So there is a need for some kind of a coordinated approach, so that if network guy sees something not okay, all the others should respond. Usually what happens, you have to go up the ladder, and somebody on the top again will have to instruct the administrator to act, or somebody else to act. The time is lost. So you need a coordinated protection. Then you have a contextual awareness. So this will come through proper education, periodic education. What is going on? What are the new threats? What kind of things can happen? Which kind of exposures are there for our organization? So with that understanding, when you look at the logs, when you can summarize the logs, you will quickly able to visualize what kind of an attacks are possible, which are at threat, which I need to protect, what are the available tools with me to protect them, where all I have to protect them, who are the people I have to bring in, which locations I'll have to look at. So many dimensions are there to give you a context of an attack. So for that, the understanding, suddenly the vendors are also, the application service providers will come into play. What damage can happen? This has happened. So what damage can happen? So such awareness is a multi team approach. Deception, what they do is, say for example, I have a web server. What some people do is that large organizations do is, they'll put a decoy. So that will also look like a web application, but that is a decoy where they collect the all the traffic that comes. They try to see what an attacker is intending to do. So because this is sitting there idle, not doing anything, the attacker will start probing it, attacking it. So the techniques used by the attacker can be known by putting up a decoy. Obfuscation is another deception. In obfuscation, what they are doing is that if your username is there, okay, or user ID is there, user ID will not be revealed. We are using some other value to
instead of
hide this thing.
Yes.
Okay, so such things can be done through obfuscation. You will not allow certain information to be seen by outsiders. You will not reveal them to others. Sometimes you will misdirection is, you will, as I told you, some decoys and all you can do things. Diversity is bring about, let's say I have all Windows system. One Windows system, if it has vulnerability, all systems have the same vulnerability. If a hacker has figured out one, he can do everything else. So if there are different systems, okay, one is Linux, one is Windows, or if I have multiple firewalls, one firewall from Cisco, another firewall from somebody else, so both will not have same vulnerability at the same point in time.
Yes.
So it is a possibility that attack can be slowed down. We are looking at slowing down, responding, monitoring, all that together are happening. So dynamic positioning. Sometimes what happens is we may have to relocate. Let's say you have a Wi-Fi being used. Wi-Fi allows up to 100 meters. Somebody can always log into that if there are things. Sometimes you may have to remove them. So this is, sometimes you may have to relocate yourself. Sometimes you may have to work from some other place. So many things are there which requires relocation and positioning. Sometimes you may have to say non-persistence. Non-persistence is that if the information is available on your RAM or somewhere or wherever it is on, let's say I'm putting cookies here. Okay, cookies is a kind of a persistent thing. So till I remove the cookie, that information, your credentials and all are lying on my cookie. Someone can come after you have closed your browser. I can come open the browser. The cookie will automatically log into my server if it has not, the session has not been terminated. So this non-persistence is one way of reducing the possibility of someone getting bored. Sometimes they'll reuse your credentials. If I'm not resetting it immediately, it is open 24/7. I use the only single credential. If I get a hold of that credential, even on the system, I can use it to attack any of the systems later on. So after you have gone, even after hours, I can do it. Privilege restriction. This is try to reduce the admin functions of a user. You just give him as much as needed. If they need extra, you create another user with that extra. They will not log in with that extra user credentials. They'll only log in when that is required. Let's say I'm an admin. I only need to take backup. Give me an access only to take backups, nothing more. Super admin I will be when I need a super admin, have a separate user ID password. Don't use it normal courses. I will log in as a backup admin, take the backups, something like that. So realignment. So we are trying to repurpose. Sometimes what happens, the organizations will have to rework some of their functionalities, workflows and other things. So we will have to be prepared in our capability to handle those and support those things. The redundancy, backup restore, as I said, keep a safe backup and you must be able to restore. What do you need for restoration? You may need, sometimes your application should also be of the latest version along with the database to suit it. If the database is old, version is new, it won't work. If the version, application version is old, database is new, it won't work. So you need the right set of them when you're building, thinking of backups and restoration. Sometimes what happens, you may be using a specific operating system or a version of it, some drivers for sensors or for printers and all. If they are not there, your system will not work. So when you are trying to restore it, you may even have to have backups of those drivers and other things which are required for that particular specific. They all go together. The segmentation is where you break up to, so that you slow down the attacker and you have a means to go and stop him in between. So you have multiple layers for segmentation. So these are some of those which are relevant to at the development time. These are vulnerabilities and risks identified by WASP top 10. These are very relevant to web applications. You can go to their website and have a detailed, there's a lot more information on it. Some more guidance is also available. Similarly, you also have SANS top 25, which is also good enough for us to take care. So here, look at, let us take a quick look at this top 10. The first is about broken access control. Broken access control, it's very prevalent. For 94% of applications that they had seen had this vulnerability. So it is so very prevalent one, we don't normally take care. The access control failed because you have not given deny by default. Deny by default is, if I am a guest, I should not be able to access anything on the system.
Yes.
Only after login I should get. The least privilege is second thing. So that is this least privileges, you only give rights to the extent that a user needs. A lot of places what happens, the control is through menu, as I earlier cited. So if I am a manager, I get a lot of menu. So the menu, when I click, I'll go and see the screen. That's fine. As a, let's say, a subordinate manager, I will not have all that. I'll only have some menu items displayed.
Role level access.
Yeah. So role level access, I click on that, I'll go there. But if I give a path, to the other screen, I will be able to access it if you have not properly defined, use that deny by default or least privilege. So elevation of privileges are possible if you expose a prompt. These are only 2-3 examples I'm saying. There are some more. If you have to go to OWASP top 10, their site and see, you will have some more guidance as well. Please do it. This is only a brief, giving you a kind of a glimpse of them.
Introduction.
Yeah. Then there's a cryptographic failures here. 80% of the applications they had, they were not encrypting the sensitive data. User passwords were stored as is without
Correct.
encryption. Passwords, there is a way how passwords have to be stored securely.
Encrypted. Yeah.
They have to be hashed. Hash is a one-way encryption. So when you cannot reverse from hash value to the original value.
Yes.
Anything changes, the hash value will change. So you put the hash value, store the hash value. But hash value, the algorithms are again open source or your easily available algorithms. So you add a salt.
Correct.
There's a method of doing it. So likewise, the encryption should be properly done. The credentials, it should not be able to guess the card data, the personal information, all of them should be properly marked and secure. Insecure protocols like HTTP, SMTP, SMTP is mail protocol, your normal SMTP,
Yes.
FTP, SSH. These are all insecure ways of logging in. You have to use a much better methods to logging in security. Sometimes what happens, on the web server, the certificate is invalid. When the invalid certificate, you don't have HTTPS going.
Correct.
So they are exposed. So you have to take it. There are all those things like that. Injection, 94% of applications have this vulnerability. Users are supplying, the data is not validated. What they do is on the web page, you are validating and taking the data, but when it reaches the server, you are not validating. This is very problematic because somebody need not enter on the form. He can send directly using the get or put or whatever you are using, those verbs he can put and send the parameters over to you. There's a possibility that they do lots of things. They can use dynamic queries. For example, in SQL, if you put a semicolon, the SQL will be terminated there. So if there is a filter which is beyond that, this thing, let's say I want usernames. I say if username is so and so, but if I put something like username so and so and remove the filter for that, it could display many of those people whom you are not supposed to display. It can terminate also at times. So these things have to be borne in mind, like you have to have a proper validation both at server side and the application side. Insecure design. Basically, the design itself is not robust.
Yes.
We have seen people without experience in design, they save on design and architect, saying that, okay, what is there? I'm able to have a page done. I'm able to have a logic done. So I can make it operational, but that's not the case. You have to be careful about the design. And there are certain secure design patterns are there. You can follow those patterns. They are available for you. You can go to OWASP and there are other sites also with some good secure design patterns. Please use those design patterns even if you're developing on your own to be proper.
Very important. Redesigning is an expensive affair.
Not only redesigning, you will miss lots of things. Let's say a team of people are sitting, you don't have proper documentation, logic. Because what happens once you develop, there's a UAT and you think that UAT is okay, then you release it. But now once you come back to redesign it, who does the whole UAT again? And the use cases, most of the UATs are also not done properly. Like developer uses a use case, the same thing the user also uses and tests it. So same thing, he sees the results are not right. But now when you are going to change the design of it, do something, it's very difficult to test your flaws if they're not properly documented. Best thing is to get it right the first time rather than redo it. The security misconfiguration. So what happens, you have developed and given it to somebody assuming that it will work in the environment similar to your development environment. In the development environment, somebody, a very well-known person or somebody who is aware of this has securely logged in or configured it and you're using it. But when you give it to the third-party user or somebody, they have configured something a server on which you are porting your application, then that is not properly hardened. There's a lot of unwanted things there. Let us say, for example, you have done some debugging. The debugging code is also moved onto the server. It should not be done. So somebody else who looks at the debugging will know exactly your flows, your errors, issues with your software. So when you're moving software from your testing area to your production or pre-production areas also, you have to be careful what you're moving in. And you have to ensure that the pre-production area is also having similar hardening as the production server, so that you will be able to know the flaws or something not happening the way you want. The pre-production environment generally is not as good as a production environment. You'll have issues when you moved it from pre-production to production. It does not behave the way it does, or you expect it to do. So there are some default accounts sometimes which we would not have removed, either from the database, it could be from the application. In the applications also, we will have a lot of sample codes and sample things. So that all those things you will have to remove when it goes to the production system. So there are unnecessary features will be there. Somebody, maybe you have written a half of the code and suddenly you want you moved into something else, developed some part. Now you have not removed your half finished code from it. Although the logic may not take it there, but it should not be existing there. There could be some issues that can crop up. There could be some features, that is some functionality that is not intended or required or not tested, which you are releasing it. So all these are ways in which a thing can be hacked, or we can error handling. If as I said, see 404 error or something reveals the traces, I know the exact path. That's not correct. There are vulnerable outdated components. Sometimes we are using old components because let's say Java, I'm not using the latest version. I'm using some old version because that's what the old code was written on. And that is how it is compatible. New things issue has some issues. So I have not yet migrated to it. So likewise, what happens when you are using outdated or vulnerable things, some of your features are not supported, some of the security is not supported, they can be easily hacked. These are some of the things that the attackers are looking into. Then identification authentication failures, these are weaknesses in confirming user IDs. Just as I spoke earlier, you are not really taking his role, giving him approvals for accessing certain parts. Sometimes session management is not done. Cookies are there, persistent cookies are there. I can re-log in using the old cookies. All those things are part of it. Better you go in for a multi-factor authentication, which will help you reduce some of these user-related issues. So software and data integrity failures, it's a small percent, but major things that are happening because software and data integrity failures are code, the environment, untrusted components. You have taken third-party components, put it into that. Somebody has Googled something, they saw some fancy items on the Google, they have incorporated into their application. All these can lead to issues. So they are you are responsible for having supplied that code. We are responsible for the components as well. Security logging and monitoring failures. As I said, if proper logs are not generated, it's very difficult for us to figure out what's happening. It's very difficult for us to monitor before something goes wrong. And so those application logs, they are required. Then server side request forgery. This is a recent happening where without validating the user supplied URLs, you are giving it. So let's say there's a request for to be taken to a particular next page. If I'm not controlling on my system through a relative path to it, but it goes to some other location, then you'll have a problem of something else, user being taken somewhere else. You may be going into one of the unwanted servers also with some user interfaces. If you are having a, like, let's say your Active Directory, you are having a user ID through which you will have access all across your organization. Using the same access, the attacker can suddenly redirect it to another server on which you also have an access, bypassing firewalls, ACLs and other things, application firewalls. So these are broadly the 10 ones, things mostly that are very highlighted vulnerabilities and risks on WASP. You have to run through the whole of your SDLC process. Security should start from inception up to the retirement of a software, the concept stage, development stage, production, utilization, support, retirement. So that's all you need to take care mostly from the security perspective. Yeah, I'll conclude here because I think I've taken longer.
Yes. So thank you, Mr. Murali Krishna, for your valuable time. So some of the participants wants to have a discussion with you. Is that okay, Murali Krishna?
Can we have later, or they can send the questions, I can answer them, or we can take it outside the call
Okay.
separately. Because yeah.
Can we have just couple of minutes?
Yeah, you can one or
just
two
couple of
generic.
parts. Yeah.
There are generic questions you can just ask.
Okay. So meanwhile, I'm reclaiming the host, Murali Krishna. So I'll be the host now. Okay. Yeah. So thank you, my dear friends. Thank you for attending this particular training. I hope this training has given you an awareness on the importance of cybersecurity in the current era. So who wants to have a quick talk with the speaker? Please raise your hand. So Murali Krishna, there are a couple of participants who wants to have a quick talk with you. So is that okay? Shall I unmute you for a quick session? Okay,
please.
So let's have with Humphrey, an international participant. Hello, Humphrey. How are you doing? How is today's session?
Good morning, and thank you to Krishna for the wonderful training it's just given us. My question is, as a DevOps engineer, I hear nowadays they're talking about DevSecOps.
Yes.
DevSecOps. Is cyber resilience linked to DevSecOps, or is it part of that?
Yeah.
Okay, and then another question is just to ask to you soon. Is this going to be part of the course for our institute, or are you planning to have this training as a particular course?
Yes, DevSecOps is a different course. It's not part of a normal DevOps course. It's an exclusively different course. Okay. So it's all about security. Am I right, speaker?
Yeah. See, now DevSecOps is actually now coming up as because of the agility that is required in operations. Like we need to quickly be able to develop something, incorporating security into it and testing it and deploying it. So the DevOps came into being for that kind of a speeding up of the process once this agile modes of systems are catching up. As well as now we are adding a component of security into it. But the problem here is that you cannot go midway with the DevSecOps without having previously defined the security components into it. Because suddenly here we are looking at a delta change or a small changes. That's how the SecOps works for quick changes. So unless we have a robust security already built into that application, we cannot just jump into DevSecOps. We have to first make a transition into incorporating the security features suitable for DevSecOps, and then we go into that.
Okay.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you. And I have please have a look at the chat box. So if you want to have a contact Mr. Speaker, Mr. Murali Krishna, so I have just submitted the link in the chat box. So please, if you want to contact, please submit that. Click on that link and submit your details and a brief description about your question. And we will be sharing this information to speaker. Speaker will be ready to talk to you. Okay, we'll reply to you. Okay, so let's have one more interaction with Mr. Praveen Kumar. Praveen, you have any question to Mr. Murali?
Yes, first of all, thank you for giving the opportunity, sir. Yes, sir. And thank you, Murali, sir, also for giving this valuable information about cyber security and resilience system. And my doubt is regarding this session, as a part of development team nowadays, cybersecurity is coming more into consideration even before developing the app, and also some users, those who are very fear to test the application based on the vulnerabilities that app is having. So at the very initial level, if I am a developer, how far can I consider the cybersecurity ecosystem, sir, while in the initial stage,
Yeah.
initial stage of the development?
So when you are developing an app, for instance, okay, as a developer, you're just a developer. So you would be making certain choices about the platform on which you can put and the kind of application, the permissions that the application will have, the app will have when it runs on an environment, and how much it is dependent on other components on the environment. Let's say when you're developing a small app, that app is a unit by itself. You have only control on the app. You do not have control on the environment on which you're going to deploy it. So you will have to look from two perspectives. One, as a developer and an application provider or an app provider, you are having certain responsibility to give a secure app to your client. The second part is the functionality that goes into the app that will have some data components, interacting components that will interact either with the server at the backend API with something, or it has some form with some elements. It moves up and back and forth between server and your app. So all those things that are relevant to a client or a customer or the user, those things will have to, you will have to incorporate security features into it at the time of your coding to suit the sensitivity of that information. If you look at it, say, let's say you're developing some app for a European country, or where there is a lot of emphasis on privacy, there's a lot of emphasis, GDPR is there. As a developer, you become responsible to ensure that GDPR requirements are met in your app as well. If you are developing it for some other, let's say within our own country, some country where they are not very particular, you don't have a law as of today, but still there is one thing called as legally, it is called as you should have a reasonable amount of security built into your devices or your products that you give. So as a product developer, you need to consider the platform level issues that you will have, the core software that you are trying to develop, what it does, how it, what components you are using it, where from you are getting it, how secure are they, how can they be maintained. For instance, let's say some component that you have used has a vulnerability. Hacker can use that vulnerability which you procured from someone else to hack your application, your app, and cause some damage to your own users and clients. So that way, this is a larger subject. So you have to start off on the security from the starting point. That's why I said secure SDLC. Throughout the SDLC, you will have the security component running parallel to your other functional requirements.
And what could be any budget proportion will be there, sir, for implementing this security from the initial?
So, no, there is nothing like budget. See, the point is that the effort that you put in is, as a developer, it's the resources that you're going to use, or how much more effort you're going to put into make this code secure. So in such an event, what you are looking for is how easily can you incorporate security, which is the best time to incorporate security is when you're starting, okay, when still you're sitting on the design phase itself. Before design, the concepts are there. So which components do I have to bring in? What security features will have to bring in? If you start looking at it from the very beginning, it will be very economical for you. But if you have already built something and want to retrofit it, it's a very big effort. A lot of effort will be wasted on that. So better start off early enough.
I mean, coordinated approach, as you have shown in
the coordinated approach is when you're going to deploy. Let's say in an organization at your client site, it is running.
Yes.
Okay, there's a server, There are so many servers of the client. There are users from the client side. Let's say you have a huge establishment, right? Let's
Yes.
say a bank is there, or some other industry is there, manufacturing industry is there. You have taken your software and deployed it there. So it is not the only software. There are so many other softwares that are residing. Environment may be client provided. Sometimes you may be able to host on your own environment. Sometimes you'll have to host it on client's environment. So when you are doing in such a way, there is a need for coordination, because anything on that network can affect anything else on the network. Any person in that organization can affect any other system on the in the organization.
Yeah,
So
through pen
that
drive
way,
or
it is a
whatever.
more integrated comes from the overall. See, here we are looking at a device. As I said earlier, when we are talking about a cyber resilient one, we are looking at it for different users, including if you are sending a satellite, it could be you are sending a rocket, you are sending a weapon, you are developing something for medical requirement. So where the device construct also will incorporate the security parts. Your interface software will also have the security part. The network and environment will also have the security part. So all those elements come.
Okay.
That's why I said that complexity comes with the environment. Not every developer will have to do the networking part, take care of networking. Not every day, we need not do that way if you're just a developer. But when you're deploying, you need all this.
Okay. So in the world, like no programming language is not having zero vulnerability, sir, as you have.
No, it is nothing like that. There's nothing. Every 1,000 lines of code is expected to have one vulnerability which can be exploited. It's only people there. What happens is we are all human beings, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Some error
So-
can happen somewhere.
There will always a
Yeah.
loose ends.
And you cannot think about all possibilities of scenarios in
Yes,
life.
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So that's the reason patches are coming up.
Not only
Yeah.
patches, so many vulnerabilities are getting exposed. They are running into several thousands each year, if you know. And most of the code, some of the code is reused. Some of the code is you are depending on third-party providers. So there are so many lot of issues are there with that. So as a developer, let's say I am developer, I'm responsible for it. I will ensure, okay, I'm taking this code from X. I will ensure that code is secure. I'm taking this person on, let's say, services of one person temporarily. I will ensure that person is properly educated and in the security aspects, and he is properly delivering me the secure code. When I'm taking design from someone else, I will ensure that designer is properly considering the security. What scenarios is he considering? All those come.
Okay. Understood, sir. Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Murali, sir. And
Thank you, brother.
yeah.
One more final call, because
Yeah.
time is a limitation. My dear participants, if you want to have more continue the conversation with Mr. Speaker, Mr. Murali Krishna, please use the link which I have just posted in the chat box. We'll be ending this particular session with the final interaction by Mr. Imran Khan. Hello, Imran Khan. Good evening. How are you doing?
You're muted.
You are now allowed to unmute and talk, Mr. Imran Khan. Mr. Imran Khan,
Yeah.
you are now allowed. Yes.
Yeah, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
My question is, who can take this course? I mean, non-IT candidates can do this.
Which one? So
Non-IT
this is
students. I mean,
see, there are various elements in this overall security. Okay, if you are a non-IT person, you can take
Yeah.
on a management part of it. Let's say in an organization, you need
Okay.
see you can do it at different levels. Okay, here this is in a whole SDLC. When we are talking about SDLC, this starts from the concept stage to the final retirement of the software, that is development. First, what happens? Let us say you are a non-technical person. Okay, you have, let us say, understanding or capabilities to understand the
Gathering
users
requirements.
business requirements. Okay, you can go collect all the requirements. Once you have some orientation understanding about the security and other things, you can incorporate them as part of your requirements into the requirements document. That requirement document then comes to the developers for developing it. Then you can guide the testers or the users. See, these are the things I have asked. This is the significance of these particular things I have asked. Please test them. So after they test, if you are happy with their test scenarios that they have taken, let us say I'm not at all into security. Okay. Now I want the integrity part. Okay. Integrity is that if I say, if I enter 2 throughout, it should be 2. The value should not change, right? Without the
Okay.
user again coming back and changing it. 2 should be always 2. So when you say 2 is 2, 2 should be always 2 until I change. So what you have to do, you'll have to ask the people, try to change it to 3. Will it change at the back end? Will some other number come or something else? When you're storing, can I by mistake do something? So you will be developing some use cases, test cases for the testers to see, for the users also to later on check. So if something is to be a fact, if a 2 into 2 should be 4, you should say try test 2 into 2 is equal to 4. Also test 3 into 3 is equal to 4. 2 into 3 is 6. Something like that, you will be developing some test cases for normal functionality. But security also you can do. How do you do? If I'm a user, I get this menu, access to this form. If I'm not a user, I'm a guest, can I access anything else? Could be your questions that you raise as a non-technical person. Somebody who's testing will test them and tell you this has failed, this has succeeded. So as a non-technical person also, you can look into the entire management part of it. Somebody has to manage the whole requirements. Somebody has to define the requirements. Somebody has to test those requirements. These are all non-technical parts. You can be part of all these things.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
sir. I
you.
had this doubt because I am a supply chain student. This year I'm going to graduate. So I want to change my domain. So that's the reason I asked. Thank
When
you
you
so much,
want to change, see, when you want to change from Radware is a hardware. You are trying to sell the Radware part, right? Radware is mostly into the networking, balancing and all, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Is it not? You are into those
Yes, sir.
components. So, okay, now
No,
you have
actually, I'm
some.
a supply chain student.
No,
Yeah.
supply chain. He's talking about he's into supply chain domain,
Okay. You are
non-IT.
into-
Yeah, non-IT sector. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, right.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Murali Krishna, on behalf of Logic Labs Technologies, on behalf of all the attendees for taking your precious time to give this awareness on cybersecurity. So what will be the right next session, Murali Krishna? Could you give guidance to the participants? What would be the
See,
next,
if now
session?
that you have opened for the questions, okay. So we can, you can collect some questions that whatever doubts they have, whatever they want to understand a little more on that, okay. Then we can respond, structure it according to that, what is generic to everyone. If there are any specific questions, we can take one-on-one and then we can resolve it with them. If there are something that is useful to others, we can structure it according to that. Okay. Because this is a very vast subject. It can go on for several hours, but there's no point discussing everything. So let us see, because we have to slowly integrate, accept or understand and slowly move on this line. We will see what the users want, then we can come.
Yes, we are curious to know your next plan of action. So thank you again. And thank you very much, my dear participants, for attending this session.